America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Sampson, do you have anything more?
We do not have any changes to the agenda.
Anyone here have any changes that they'd like to throw out?
No.
Okay. If not, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as shown.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you, Rebecca. Brenda on the second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the approval of the agenda as shown, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 4-0. Scheduled presenters. Jeff, Truth and Taxation meeting. It's our annual.
Yes, this is our annual Truth and Taxation meeting. I'm going to put the PowerPoint up here and then have Josh take over.
All right. So the annual Truth and Taxation meeting tonight we'll be approving the levy, and as part of that we discussed, if you want to show the next slide please, proposed property tax levies for tax payable 2022, some information on budget, and then as we've gone through, we've had to initially show the preliminary levy in September. The public had a chance to comment. So go to the next slide please. Just an overview of what's going on. So what we have here is the preliminary budget for fiscal year 22, current operating budget for the school district. And it combines the preliminary budget the board approved in May versus the actual actual revenues for last fiscal year. Just as kind of a comparison to see where things have changed. Kind of some of the maybe presumptions as we go into the budget for 22 was some enrollment changes as we graduated a much larger class than we brought in kindergarten. And that would be a reduction in revenue. But also in that general fund would be some ESSER III dollars, federal dollars, that helps to bump some of that back up. So there's not a whole ton of change in the general fund, especially relative to percentage change. In the food service, a lot of the revenue currently is through the federal grant for students to have lunch and breakfast provided for them. But there also is a transfer of some ESSER funds to cover prior loss in food service, as well as we go to community service. That revenue would be some of those ESSER III dollars in community ed to cover, again, some losses. Fund balance-wise, as we've learned from audit last month when we presented, the community service has a negative or deficit balance, so that's to help offset some of those extra costs that were incurred during COVID and whatnot. Debt service is really set to the requirements for the needs, basically the mortgage payment for the district. The debt would be on the auditorium, field house, and HVAC projects that we've had throughout the district. And that's really set to the payment schedule. And the levy is set to collect 105% of the needed for debt service, with the assumption that there could be some delinquent taxes, and to cover some potential debts, we can cover our debt service payments. Generally what happens, and you'll see a fluctuation as we talk about the levy certification later, oftentimes we'll have what's a debt service excess reduction. And if we have too much built up in our debt service, we don't get to keep that in our general fund. We give that back as a reduction to lower taxes to the taxpayers. Trust and agency would be our scholarship. Generally, it's mostly priority is the scholarship fund. Last year, we did a good job of kind of switching out how scholarships were collected and paid out. So a lot of things changed in terms of getting the money collected to pay out. If, say, a student were to earn a 4-year scholarship, rather than getting paid $500 over 4 years, it was all paid up in front, so that the timing in and out of those funds happened a little bit better. So you'll notice that the revenues and expenditures for the trust and agency were higher in fiscal 21 than they will be for fiscal 22, as things are now more current. The last one is OPEB debt service. We had a $1 million bond for OPEB to pay for other post-employment benefits. That debt has run out at the end of last year, so there is no need to budget any dollars in fiscal 22 for that. In total, the actual fiscal '21 budget, where we ended up, and where the fiscal '22 budget, current budget is, in all about a 1.4% change from the prior year. Go to the next slide. So we're looking at, this is real consistent and similar to what we saw last month with the audit. Kind of where does the revenue come from in order for the school district? And the largest chunk of that is the state aid. And my eyes are terrible and it's purple, but I think that says 74%.
74.7.
74.7, I passed. So the largest section of our revenue is coming from the state, and that really is based on formula, and a formula is largely related to student enrollment. Local service sources would be primarily the levy that will be approved tonight, county sources. Some small amounts in there for items like the gate at events or fees that may be collected locally, but generally that is your tax levy. And then federal aid, and that, even though it's at 5.6%, there's actually a larger percentage than we are normally at. Usually our district hovers under $750,000 at a single audit level. This past year, with all the ESSER and GEARS and CARES dollars, we were forced over that amount to have a single audit. So the federal aid was a little higher than what is our normal year for our district. What the next one? So we talked revenues, now here are the expenditures, and a lot of them will tie out almost pretty consistent with the revenues and where they come from. We try our best to be fiscally responsible with the revenue we have and our expenditures and not try to overspend. And if possible, we've got an undesignated fund balance that is significantly low, around 3%, where an auditor or a group like Moody's would like to see a 12 to 16%. We try to build that when we can, but still offer the great programs that we do for our district. Again, same format as the prior slide for revenues. The fiscal '21 actual listed on the left with the fiscal '22 budget on the right. And again, with GEARS and ESSER, we have some increased expenditures that are offset by those revenues. $125,000 specifically set for learning loss items, but also some of those funds from the $645,000 from ESSER 3 that is used to cover some of the food service deficit and community service deficit. You'll see those expenditures in there, as it really is just a transfer. The debt service, again, is set to pay for the actual payment on our debt for the fiscal '22. Those are the actual dollar amounts that there. Trust and agency, again, you'll see a reduction in the expenditures as we were moving to paying off some of the recipients that had multiple year scholarships last year, going back to more just a one-to-one year. The student receives a scholarship, the student gets paid out the scholarship. And then the OPEB debt service, since we have paid that off, there are no expenditures in that for fiscal '22. In total, from actual fiscal '21 to preliminary budget for fiscal '22, about a 1.1% change in $17 million. Next one. So here we're kind of looking at, we had a slide with a pie chart that shows where revenues are come from, and this is where our dollars are spent. You see district support services and admin at the top, but when you look at the middle section there, regular instruction, vocational instruction, special ed instruction, instructional support services, and pupil support services, that's really the teaching and educating and what goes on in the bulk of what we do for our students. About 75% of our expenditures in the district. Then you'll see the sites and buildings as the next largest one is 14, and you have 3 large buildings like we do. There's going to be some cost related and associated with that. But those are the breakdown of where the dollars are spent throughout the district. The next one. The pie chart is actually a little messier for me on this one than the previous graph, but that's the visual representation of kind of where they're at in terms of salary and wages. So the big blue part would be just the salary portion of what gets paid out, and then the employee benefits. So in terms of salary, benefit, wages for our district, about 68% of what we do for expenditures goes to that. Go ahead to the next slide. So kind of overview of going now, switching gears and going from the budget to talk about, excuse me, the levy. So and it's kind of an introductory slide. You can go to the next one. So when we do our certification of our levy today, there are really 3 funds that are affected as collected for revenue for the district from the levy. The general fund, which is the main operating source for the district and day-to-day operations, community education, and debt service. And of that 100% pot of dollars, just about 52% going to general fund and operating of the district, over and above what the state would provide, and then debt service, about 45%, and just a small portion for community ed. We'll go ahead to the next one. All right, so this is the document that the board will approve later today when we certify the levy for 2021 payable 2022. And it just breaks it down by fund, and you're looking at, on the left, the actual 2020 levy pay 21 versus the proposed that the board will be acting on tonight. The first one is the primary fund that operates for the district, is the general fund. And you see the column now on the right, just before percent change, the increase, decrease. A slight increase in the general fund levy of $13,000, which is less than 1% increase from the prior year. Community ed has a little bit of increase, but in terms, in $2,400, but in terms of percentage is still below 2%. Debt service is where we talk about having some excess debt that is gone back to the taxpayers to reduce the burden for taxpayers. So there's a slight decrease in debt service of just about 4.4%. And then obviously the OPEB we will not be collecting on that, as that fund is no longer valid. In total, about a $72,000 reduction in levy from prior year, or 1.66% reduction. And the last page, I believe, is the resolution portion, when we get to that portion of the night.
Thank you, Josh. So later in the meeting, the board will need to approve this resolution along with the levy page that will show, that shows the drop of, was it 1.6%?
Yep.
In the levy. Any questions right now from the community in regards to the Truth and Taxation meeting? Mark?
Just a question, is this just the levy part, not the voter approved taxes?
This is an every year thing that the district goes through to set the levy for the following year. So this,
Right, so on our property tax, we have a levy amount and we have a voter approved amount.
the voter approved amount was already done whenever the elections were held for those voter approved ones. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, and I'm just curious on that one, when some of that expires.
I don't know if you know that off the top of your head.
I believe that the referendum for the $500 per pupil is 2026.
That's the operating levy, right?
Correct.
And then the other voter approved bonds.
When those pay out, so you're talking the debt service, not the general fund. The debt service would be 2032.
Any other questions with the Truth and Taxation hearing? Or comments?
I'm not exactly sure when I should speak. I'd like to speak to the round one permanent reductions that's on the agenda. That's next.
There'll be a part in the public comment.
Just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing out on my opportunity. Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, that's all I can see for public comment.
We have a small book here. I'm trying to find the right page on. Nothing else for you? It wouldn't appear on the Truth and Taxation. You ready to jump to the review and comment?
Yep.
Okay.
For the upcoming February 8th election, we have to do a public hearing on the review and comment document. As with any bond proposal, our proposal has to be sent to the state Minnesota Department of Education, and they do what is called a review and comment on the proposed project. The project is broken down right here, and this, once the hearing is over, this will be published in the newspaper. And based on the department's analysis of the school district's required documentation and other pertinent information from sources of the Minnesota Department of Education, the Commissioner of Education provides a positive review and comment. And so tonight's hearing is on the information for the project that we are proposing to the voters on February 8th, including these areas at the top here for the middle school, high school, in the area of HVAC upgrades, kitchen receiving area, the CTE area, the elementary school site improvements, community education center roof replacement, and other costs associated with the bond itself. In total, the total project comes under just under $8 million for $7.985 million. Any questions on the review and comment piece?
Forward.
Okay.
Next on the scheduled presenters is Dave Peterson with the school forest update.
Yeah, I'm going to talk try to do it quickly tonight about the school forest program. It's tough to do quickly because it's actually been going on almost 2 years now. So I'll make it quick and kind of go through where we're at as of right now. A couple years ago, the McGalis family came to us wanting to donate some time and donation of funds to be able to revitalize our school forest program. We were very interested because it's a great outdoor space. If anyone's not familiar, it's the space between the tennis courts and the elementary. It's a little over 10 acres. It was used in the past, but with neglect and storms, and it kind of got beat up, and it was actually pretty tough to be able to utilize. So we were interested. So what we did is we formed a small committee to determine the steps to, the proper steps to revitalize and how we wanted to handle it. We'd meet periodically, and then after that we'd get the DNR involved. And to get the DNR involved, list it as an official school forest, listed with the DNR. And with that comes assistance from the DNR for planning, development, provided resources for any questions you might have on what kind of species you might have out in your forest and how to maintain it. So actually pretty nice to have that resource. They provided some educational material. I believe the DNR was a part of the field desks that were donated.
There's a family that makes field desks for school forests throughout the state. They're in partnership with them. And plus the McGalis has created 30 field desks as well.
Yep, so we can have them for the high school, middle school, and for the elementary. So great resource, great to be a part of, having the DNR involved, and obviously the McGalises, because they've worked tirelessly in the forest to be able to clean it up. So that's what we did. We got in there, good old-fashioned hard work, and got some chainsaws, some equipment in there, cleaned it all up, established the trails, used previous maps that Amanda Thompson and Dwayne Pliscott had to develop exactly where to go and kind of really revitalize the entire forest area. It was a lot to look at. It was a big project, but at this point, obviously, it looks phenomenal. Once we reestablished the paths, we were about due to get all of our mulch redone at the elementary school, which you do about every 5 to 7 years. So we recycled that, put that down on the paths. Turns out it covered all of them. That's how much mulch was over there. So that really established a nice kind of walking area for the students, for the public, for anyone that wants to go through there. I know cross country used it quite a bit for running. So now we're starting to utilize that space again. McGalis family also brought in prairie restorations, and they restored around the retaining pond. Once again, some people may not see that area, but it had natural prairie grass. So we revitalized that. That company came in. It was about a 5-step program to get that revitalized. They'll be back out in spring to get that growing the way it's supposed to. And then the last thing that we actually did just before the snow fell was we built about a 10-foot wide path from the sidewalk by the tennis courts all the way around the retaining pond to the main entry to really establish a main entry into the forest. And then the DNR provided some signage that we have out there, kind of made it more inviting. Made it so people know that they can go right off the sidewalk, right into this forest. And we're going to continue to put signage out there, continue to improve it, continue to use it really as a classroom space. I know the teachers really like using that space to identify plants and science, and the elementary kids love to go out there. So, you know, it's been a 2-year project. It's been a lot of work to this point. Without some of the volunteers, the donations that we've had, we definitely wouldn't be where we're at right now. But it was a great thing to be a part of. And it's really coming along. It looks great. Everyone's welcome to go out there and check it out. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We'll continue to work at it. I'm sure we got another 2 years invested into doing it. Seriously, the McGalis family did the buckthorn removal or started it. I had no idea that buckthorn can be the size of a small oak tree. It's unbelievable, but they've done a phenomenal job. It's really changed the entire appearance as you walk in there. So I'm excited. It's just additional outdoor classroom space that we're actually back to using as we should. So we'll continue to improve it and make it better. If anyone has any questions, I'm here.
Dave, I think the volunteerism and the community partnerships that we've had have been very important for this project as well. There's been a lot of, and we ran it through a lot of the board meetings, but you just don't realize it until you put it down on paper how much community effort has gone into that, with the McGalis is leading the way for that.
I have to mention Anderson Trucking's been phenomenal. Anderson Lawn Care has been a key contributor to making this happen. Not to mention all the volunteers out there just working in hot mosquito-infested woods. It's just, without everyone involved, I don't think we'd be where we're at today. So it's impressive if you can look back to where we were and where we're at today. And 2 years doesn't seem like a lot of time, but it looks fantastic, so I'm pretty happy.
The school's Facebook site has a lot of pictures, I believe, from the school forest from this past fall, where kids are out in different classes using that, if you guys are interested in taking a look at that.
And I have more I can add also, Jeff.
Okay.
I have a question, if I may. I'm the new scoutmaster for the Boy Scout troop.
Yeah.
Would you be open to volunteers? We have two scouts here and a scout here that will soon be doing Eagle projects.
Great.
Would that, would you be open to hear proposals or bounce some ideas off of you?
Absolutely. I think it's a perfect fit. Yes, would love it.
And is this where Mitch is doing his current Eagle
Is he-
project?
Yes.
Hoffman is
The
doing
benches?
Yeah,
Yep.
for the benches.
And they have to be different, but
Sure. And there's plenty of things to do out there. We're gonna have multiple areas for classroom space, and yeah, there's plenty to do out there, so we can bounce around some ideas and come up with something. You bet.
we have a lot of labor that would help.
I love the sound of that.
Well, for a process.
No,
Community service project.
Right.
No, that's fantastic.
I'll
That'd be
feed it.
great.
Yeah. Can I get your contact info after this?
You bet you can. Sure.
Or can-
I'll write it down for you.
It's like 10 bucks.
Anything else for Dave?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Reports and communication. Does anyone have anything that they would offer for committee reports?
Yeah, WeTech met last week. We were pretty lucky to make quorum for that, so it sounds like December's hard for that meeting. So just the big things that were coming up, we talked about wireless access updates. About 30% need updating, and got to learn a lot about some of the technology that's coming up. The next gen equipment is coming up and will increase bandwidth for classrooms quite a bit, but the cost for that is pretty significant, so we talked about scheduling for that to sort of wait for that price to come down. And mostly talked about wireless bandwidth. A couple updates about some major security issues, none of which affected us, but something about a patch for a patch, and I'm increasing my understanding of technology every meeting I go to. And then the next meeting we have will be the organizing meeting for that in February. So it's always good. And it's nice because we can see the progress of Zumbrota Mazeppa's construction project over there. So every time we go, it's a little bit more put together. So yeah, it's nice.
Anyone else?
The community advisory meeting will be held this Wednesday on 12/22. And then Ed Foundation had their Purse Bingo fundraiser on December 4th, and that was very well attended. It was a sold-out event, and I was there. It was a really fun event. They plan to have another one in February, so keep an eye out for that coming up.
Okay. I do see the extracurricular group met.
Well, yes, we did, but I think I'm going to leave that for Reed's report.
We'll deal with that on your report.
I'm sorry?
You're okay with dealing with the extracurricular meeting until your report comes up?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Committee? Next is administrative board reports. Ms. Shapi, do you have anything to?
I didn't have time to do a report for you guys, but I did just want to say that, this has been a December to remember when it comes to working through another December during a pandemic. It doesn't matter if you're a cafeteria worker to a custodian to a paraprofessional to a teacher, and all those that I didn't say it's pretty intense right now with staff shortages and things that staff are having to do in light of pandemic. So just a shout out to my staff. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anything for Jen? Moving along, middle school, high school, and tech. Tim?
What she said. We're plugging along. We're halfway through second quarter already, and starting to plan for some things for like high school finals towards the end of January, and even starting to work on next year's schedule and registration of students coming at the end of January, beginning of February. As far as tech goes, both of our former tech assistants moved on to bigger and better things. So been working a lot with Stacy Larson, who is our new district-wide tech support specialist. She's got a wealth of knowledge and has hit the ground running.
Okay. Anything for Mr. Hodges? Questions? Moving down, Community Ed and Activities Department.
Just like to start with highlighting 4 of our students and their individual honors at the local level, which is a Minnesota State High School League Award. 2 of our seniors in the AAA, that's Academics, Arts, and Athletics. That's J.C. Wenschel and Connor Leschke. And so that has been sent on to the region for advancement, so we look forward to watching that progress. And the junior award is for the Excel. That's for excellence in community education and leadership, and 2 of those juniors are Lauren Ritz and Cannon Quaid, and that gets submitted directly to the high school league for consideration. So excited about that. I can answer any questions you might have about extracurricular committee that met last Wednesday, or anything else that I include on the report.
In the past, it's been an ad hoc. Do you have anything you want to chime in with right now?
Will you speak to the presentation?
So I invited, there was 12 of us total. One of the members was absent. There's a culmination of head coaches, advisors, as well as board member and myself. And we talked around about the idea of joining or applying to join the Three Rivers Conference as the HBL conference. It's currently at 9, and 3 of those members have already applied for a Big 9 admittance. Those three are the Cass Manorville, Byron, and Stewartville. So that leaves us with 6. Initially, in our early meetings, we had talked about ways that we could try to invite other districts to come to the HVL. That was being met with resistance. Not many people were interested in that. So we were looking at the 6 of us joining as a group. The remaining 6 are ourselves, Goodhue, Lake City, Zabroda, Mazeppa, Pine Island, and Rochester Lourdes. Trying to stay unified and making sure that we all had an opportunity to join that conference at Three Rivers. And we've had some meetings collectively, or excuse me, individually as HVL, and we've had a couple meetings individually or collectively with the Three Rivers in attendance. And so I broke that down, and we had a presentation and discussion last Wednesday. A lot of this makes sense. A lot of those Three Rivers schools already are section opponents. In previous years, we have been classified in Section 1, in Section 2, and in Section 4. Currently this year, and this is the first year of a 2-year cycle, all of our programming, with the exception of 2 boys and girls soccer, are in Section 1. So this movement, or this going to the HVL, or to the Three Rivers Conference, makes a lot of sense in regards to our section.
I guess from a standpoint of the committee, the recommendation that came out of the committee was unanimous to put forth the application to the other conference. There's a lot of things that still need to be discussed at the coach level, schedule level, things of that nature, tournaments. But I think their view really was that this is the best opportunity to be competitive, to have them work as the 6 of them together versus trying to go out on your own and or find others, districts to come into the HVL. And I think from a timing standpoint, it probably made the most sense, because if we sat, the alternative would be more likely that we would be placed, correct me if I'm wrong, Green, we would be placed by the HVL, or the state high school league. And the likelihood is that we would go to Section 4, is it? North?
Traditionally, yes.
Which you just kind of think geographically what that would look like for Canton Falls sports and athletics. So.
When again is this transition taking place, subject to approval?
If the board approves tonight later on, we'd send out the letter.
Tonight, we would apply tomorrow. That would allow the Three Rivers ADs to give their recommendation to the Three Rivers superintendents for approval at their January meeting. And then we would not have full inclusion until the 23-24 school year. That's when we would start.
Okay. Yeah.
Are we dealing with this later on? Yes, we are.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a point of clarification, I know in the note section, there's a couple, and they haven't really talked about fine arts with the model. Can you expand upon that?
So what we will look at is so the premise of us applying is based off of 2 visions based off geographics. All right? And then we know that once we start looking at, the Three Rivers is very adamant about us showing that we are extremely interested by applying before we get down to the nuts and bolts of discussing everything. So we would have to, once we apply and if we're accepted, we would then start looking at what does each programming consist of. For example, if all 6 of us come in, that would leave us with 17 schools. Each program gets a different level allotted of contests. And so volleyball gets 17. There isn't any volleyball coaches that are going to give up their 3 volleyball tournaments. So we got to look at what would that other half look like. Getting into the fine arts, music, we have instrumental and and vocal clinics, plus we have HVL Day. Three Rivers only has one. So we would look at trying to mesh those as to what makes sense to give our kids the most opportunities.
Thank you.
Okay. Jeff, you're up.
You want to talk to Dave? Anything else?
Aside from business as usual for me,
You meant that right.
I guess I would like to echo what the principal said and just thank the staff and, working short-staffed. We're in the middle of a busy season, indoor sports season, and thank you to all the coaches too for their flexibility and their help, because we need it. So thank you to everybody, but otherwise, business as usual.
Where are you at right now with your staff? I mean, you've gone from 9 to,
We could use some help. We're doing all right though. So yeah, we're a little short-staffed right now, but it kind of helped out because we have a couple kids on break from college that are helping out. So we're making it work.
okay, thank you. Next is public input, unless Jeff wants to.
You can do my report.
I've been out of sequence so far twice, so. All you have is,
I'll just be real quick. I too want to echo what the principals and Dave talked about in thanking staff for their flexibility and patience and working with each other. Not only teaching staff, but custodial, cooks, pairs, everybody, in helping us through this difficult time, not only in December to remember, but almost a year to remember as well. Thank you all. I also want to congratulate JC, Connor, Lauren, and Cannon for their accomplishments in winning these awards in the AAA and the Excel Award. That does highlight the great things that we have going on in Cannon Falls, and with them being the epitome of that and good representatives for those awards for Cannon Falls. COVID update quickly, our numbers are dropping from when we met last in November, which is encouraging. We've come out of masking in the elementary, and we've reached those data points. At this time, the county numbers are still pretty high as far as compared to the rest of the state, but again, over the past 3 or 4 weeks, they have been dropping as well. And so hopefully that'll give us a little bit of respite going into the winter break, and hopefully that continues into January and February as well. We've done the truth in taxation and review and comment, and any questions for me, I guess?
I guess not.
Okay, I think that's, now we can move on to
Okay.
public input.
Our next section is public input. There seems to be concern out in the public about the degree of public input. Last week or last meeting, I read a recommendation from the MSBA to kind of delineate just what public input, public forum is all about. And I know later there was some more discussion on that, so I just made a copy of the Public Input 206, so we were all on the same page once more. There seems to be criticism that you're not being heard, but as I look at the federal government, they have a mezzanine, if you will, where people can come to the meeting and speak, but they cannot speak. If you go to the state legislature, if it wasn't for the COVID, they too would have an area where you could listen to the public or listen to the conversation of our legislators, but it doesn't afford an opportunity to speak. So we are an extension of that as a public entity, in that we offer the opportunity to be heard, but the discourse during the meeting is supposed to lie with the representatives that you voted for. So just so we're together on this, under procedures, it says persons who wish to have a subject discussed at a public board meeting are encouraged to notify the superintendent's office in advance of the meeting. That person should provide his or her name, address, the name of the group that they represent, and the subject to be covered or the issue to be addressed. Persons who wish to address the school board on a particular subject should identify the subject and identify the agenda item to which their comments pertain. The school board retains the discretion to limit discussion of any single agenda item to a reasonable period of time as determined by the board. If a group or organization wishes to address the board on a topic, the board reserves the right to require designation or one or more representative or spokesperson to speak on behalf of that group. So there's plenty more. There's 6 pages of this. It discusses the open forum. And again, what we try to do is let people's comments be heard, let people's statements be heard. But if we've got 12 people speaking on the same item, we would respectfully ask that you use your group to form one statement, one opinion, so we're not here for a half an hour about the same agenda item. As a board, we have the right to limit those things. It doesn't come from being dictatorial, it just comes from being orderly. So once more, we appreciate hearing from people if it doesn't pertain to a public political platform, if you will. We need to hear from our constituents, we need to hear from our taxpayers about what's important in the school. Whether you agree with us or not, please remember that we work awfully hard to make decisions. And sometimes it just doesn't fall where everybody would like it to. So please understand we're doing our best here. We are going to follow the public forum, and I would respectfully ask the board in January to begin a procedure for delineating our public forum so that we're all together and we don't have to continuously go to a political platform when one doesn't need to be heard as far as our school district is concerned. We care about our people, we care about our students. So having said that, and wasted a lot of your time, comments from the visitors can be informational in nature and must not exceed 3 to 5 minutes per issue. We went down to 2 last time because it seemed to be a busy meeting. After this meeting, we will get a more proper number of minutes per issue. The board cannot engage in discussion or debate in those 3 to 5 minutes, but will take the information and find answers if that is appropriate. As part of board protocol, it is unacceptable for any speaker to slander or engage in character assassinations at a public board meeting. Folks, I know you're here for specific agenda items, so we would like to hear from you. And we're going to try to limit the conversation to 15 or 20 minutes. We can hear what you have to say individually for a couple of minutes each, but as you wish. So would you please raise your hand, identify yourself, student, taxpayer, teacher, whatever, and speak to whatever's on your mind. Wyatt, somehow you look like you're ready to speak.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to say. I want to address the, I'm sorry.
Wyatt, please tell us who you are. I'm just reading the letter jacket.
Sorry. Yeah, I am Wyatt Moser, student, and I want to address the, wouldn't say issue, I would say more of a subject of eliminating one of the band teachers because of budget cuts. I know that Mr. Legbold was going to stay, but Mr. Duggan is likely to go, or the other option is eliminating a teacher, a younger teacher. Man, I'm getting nervous now.
You're doing well. Just speak from your heart. You'll do fine.
So, I think it's a bit much for Mr. Legbold to be teaching the 185 kids from grades 6 to 12, and also a bit much for him to be doing the paperwork, the lessons, the one-on-one stuff. Mr. Legbold is a bit more showy. He does a good job at concerts and such. He's a good teacher, good conductor. And Mr. Duggan is good at lessons and paperwork and one-on-one piano lessons, etc. So I don't know what to do. I'm just thinking that maybe we should consider letting Duggan stay, because he and Legbold are a good team.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? John?
John Grimes. My intentions of being at tonight's meetings were to express my happiness with the elementary school no longer having the mask mandate. However, as grateful as I am about this, I believe I also need to point out what appears to be a mistake on how the safe return to school plan was executed. I received a copy of the safe return to school plan by Mr. Britnall. Thanks, Bob. On December 8th, so I'm assuming that's the most current version. Specifically on page 3, the 6th bullet point references when the elementary school will no longer need to wear masks. If you don't have a copy, I'll read verbatim what it says. Cannon Falls Elementary will shift to recommended building-wide masking when 11 or less students and/or staff test positive for COVID-19 or are presumed positive for COVID-19 as defined above. That was laid out clearly and states that when the elementary gets to 11 or less students and/or staff, masking will become optional again. Also on December 8th, Mr. Sampson sent out a letter to parents stating that as of the 8th, there are only 4 positive or presumed positive cases in the school, so optional masking would then take effect again. Now the issue I have with this is that in the safe return plan, it specifically states that 11 or less students, the masking will become optional. But in Mr. Sampson's letter, that didn't happen until the cases were at 4. Now, I will acknowledge that it is possible that 7 students or staff could have found out in one day they tested negative for COVID or were ending their quarantine period. But I don't know because I didn't know what the numbers actually were.
Just real quick before you move on from that, that actually happened because we were having multiple upon multiple cases in one day. And so when cases drop off after 2 weeks, we had some days where we had 8 or 10 cases that added to those totals. So when they went up that quick, they came back down that quick. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Still have more.
Okay. Just to clarify that.
Yep. I get it. There are many things that come up every day, and I'm sure sometimes every hour, which could take away from the focus of the safe return plan. I want to be very clear, I'm not against masks. I believe every person has a right to choose that. I know I'm not going to change anyone's opinions here tonight, just like you won't change mine. I'm just asking that if the school goes into required masking, regardless if it's the elementary or high school, a weekly email be sent to every parent with the current positive and presumptive positive cases until the masking again becomes optional. Then the emails could stop.
Those numbers are on our website too.
Are they?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
So are they
we
updated
update them
daily or what?
Weekly.
Weekly?
Yep.
Okay.
And we were actually updating them twice a week during this last month just because they were changing so often.
Perfect. That takes care of my issue. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Anyone else, ma'am?
My name is Sarah DeWans. I am a parent, and I am also speaking on behalf of Mr. Duggan. Tonight is the high school band concert. It's happening right now. The teachers and students are performing the Christmas songs for parents and grandparents. And I am here missing, you saw my kids, they perform in 8th grade and in high school. But I'm missing their 8th grade concert because I need you to know how I feel about the possibility of losing Mr. Duggan as a band teacher. And I'm very upset about it. The school is here to support the community, yes. But what would the community be without a strong band program? Would our high school band be strong enough without the middle school program? Not for long. Could they represent the community well in playing for the Veterans Ceremony, the Memorial Day Parade, all the great opportunities for sporting events as they move to state? Without a middle school program and less support for the high school band program, those areas definitely will be compromised. So in the coming years, you're going to expect one teacher to efficiently run middle school and high school programs? Will one teacher be able to put together a performance as a conductor and everything that goes on backstage several times a year? And who's going to give the one-on-one lessons to all the students every week? There's no band without one-on-one lessons. Do you know that Mr. Duggan goes above and beyond every single day? Let me give you an example that happened just this morning. I mentioned earlier that there is a band concert tonight, right now. High school band is required to wear the black formals. Okay? The school provides a lot of that. They do not provide the shoes, and shoes can be expensive. Just this morning, a student said that he did not have black shoes to go with the provided tuxedo. Mr. Duggan offered the shoes off of his feet for that student. The district lost a percentage of students last year due to one teacher's actions. It was not Mr. Duggan. It seems to me that there are some corrections to mistakes that could be made as opposed to making a new one and eliminating Mr. Duggan's position. Please consider other ways to cut the budget and keep Mr. Duggan in the band room.
Thank you. Others wish to speak? You're up.
Hello, my name is Michelle Braun. I'm the music teacher down at the elementary school, and I've been with the district for 5 years. I'm coming forward tonight to make you aware of some other potential implications to one of the cuts that's up for consideration that we clearly already heard about. While the cut to the middle school, high school music instructor seems to imply that it would impact the upper level, it would potentially have unintended consequences at the elementary level as well, due to the system in place of licensure and seniority. Essentially, by voting for this cut, you'd be voting to move the band specialist to the elementary level and cut the elementary specialist, me. I don't do choir, I don't do band. I spent my whole life preparing to do elementary, and that's what I do. There are several scenarios in which this does not play out this way and I get to keep my job, but the cut as it stands today would do that. I'm here tonight to raise awareness and to advocate specifically for elementary music, because without elementary music and a strong elementary program, the band and choir programs at the upper level suffer. You currently have a elementary specialist, but this cut would potentially remove me from my position. I love my job. I want to stay. I feel powerless. I cannot be easily reassigned to another position even though I am tenured. If another teacher moves into elementary music, I must begin my job search and start over again in a new district. When I got this job 5 years ago, I said I wanted nothing more than to retire from this position someday. I still want this and hope that things go my way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Others? Mark?
Mark Lund, taxpayer. Looking over the agenda and the budget cuts, I don't see anything about revenue gains. We're looking at cuts and not revenue gains. And recalling the newspaper a few weeks ago, they reported 43 students who were down in the district. Josh probably knows the per pupil cost, I don't know, $10,000, $12,000 per pupil. That's not with the district anymore. Is that about right? Say it's $10,000.
You asking me?
Yes.
About $10,000.
$10,000, okay, 43 students short in the district, that's $430,000. You're down, you're trying to cut $450,000. I don't see anything in here on increasing revenue or why those students, if there are some that have left the district for other schools, what are we doing to bring those back? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yes.
Hi. Excuse me. My name is Sandy Meyer. I'm actually a volunteer reading tutor at the elementary school. I'm fortunate enough to be doing it this year for my second year now. Last year after spending 3 weeks in quarantine with my 2 grandsons and my daughter who had just returned to the U.S. from Australia in March, when everything got shut down, we had a rude awakening as to distance learning, and I was shocked and amazed at how difficult it was in helping their kids, and it hit me that disadvantaged children are really put in a horrible position and have been probably hit the hardest with as far as education is concerned with COVID. It's been a wonderful experience working in the elementary school. Just absolutely wonderful. I'm not going to bore you with any kind of stats or try to persuade you through stats and data that you all know better than I. Everyone in this room, no one in this room actually would argue against the importance of reading and the correlation between a person's literacy and their future path in life. We all know that there's a tremendous correlation. As Ms. Shapiro said, December has been just a nightmare. And with the elementary school, we're not over with COVID. You know, we've got, of the 14 or so children that I see on a daily basis, almost half of them have been out for 2 weeks or more. For kids to miss that much school, they're going to fall behind. And there's no way around it. And reading is absolutely critical for these kids. The reading interventionists at the elementary school are needed today more than ever, during a time when kids are at risk of falling behind due to all of these absences and what's occurred over the last year. It's just cumulative. I plead that you reconsider making cuts to the reading interventionist program. I worked in HR for 30 years, and I understand that when you're told you need to make budget cuts, first thing that 90% of employers do is they go to people, because that's where most of the money is, and it's the easiest cuts to make. But I ask you in this case, I don't know where those cuts should come from. I'm not an expert on how to run your school, but what I can tell you is that the reading interventionist positions are terribly important. These kids who are already disadvantaged are going to be more and more disadvantaged, and that also is going to be cumulative. For that reason, I ask you to reconsider that, and you know better than I where those cuts could be made. I have a feeling there's got to be something else you can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Final call? We are moving on. Thank you. Consideration to approve the finance report. Mr. Davison? Sure.
So we're looking here at basically the cash flow for the district, and the 2 main checking accounts for the district are the merchants and the community resource that we've discussed. We're generally on a 5-year rotation with our banks, currently at community resource. What you'll see there is basically the ins and outs that go through the district in terms of bills, expenditures, and then the revenues that would come in. Our main source of revenue would be the IDEAS payments through the state of Minnesota. As we discussed about the refunding from per pupil. You'll also see slightly down there toward right there in the middle, January 24th, Dakota County and Goody County taxes, and that's the cleanup payment for the property taxes for fiscal 21. Sorry, calendar 21. The big payment that will go out during this report will be at the end of January, beginning of February, and those are their debt service payments, the 2016A, 2017A, 2017B. Once those go out, you'll see a significant decrease in the amount of cash available to the district. As we sit now, there's a need for anticipation borrowing, which has been the case for the last several years. It's important to know that cash balance and fund balance are totally different, where our cash would be all funds combined, and what we have on hand, the fund balance is the actual designated, whether it be for separation of benefits or OPEB or LTFM. A little bit different than what our fund balance is. The key in this report is that through the end of this and through the rest of the fiscal year, which would be in my office, we stay positive with the cash flow and are able to make our weekly, monthly payments. If you have any questions, I can do my best to answer what you would have.
Monthly bills, any questions? If not, I would look for a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Bill, second.
Second.
Second by Rebecca. Other discussion? All in favor of approval of the monthly bill, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried, 4-0. Under action items, there is no old business, but under new business, here we go. Consideration to approve the Noble Scholarship.
Consent agenda.
Jeez, what a bad day.
It's a December to remember.
Yeah, it is a December to remember, for sure. Under the consent agenda, items are considered routine and will be enacted under one motion. In the event a board member wants to discuss any one item, it will be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. Anyone have any questions here? You always like to read the gift resolution?
Yes. As Dave mentioned earlier, we have donations from Anderson Trucking and Anderson Lawn Care for the path that was created down to the school for us. We still need to get a number to put with that, but we do want to recognize the companies. We have $500 in gift cards from Christ United Methodist Church for elementary families. We have $1,000 from the Cannon Falls VFW for the girls basketball program. We have $1,000 from the Cannon Falls Fire Department for the girls basketball program. We have $1,619.07 from Cannon Falls Fire Department for a CPR class training. We have $1,200 from the Cannon Falls Fire Department for the girls softball nets. And these people have donated a nominal amount of money for sleds in the elementary, $20 from Tess and Will Olson, $20 from Matthew and Romel Davidson for sleds, $90 from Jill Ekstrom, and $72 from Katie Lindahl for sleds for the elementary. That is always a fun time, seeing the kids go down the hills once we get more snow back. So we want to thank our donors for this month.
Other questions?
No,
Chair?
I was going to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Well, we'll do that then. Brenda on the motion,
I'll second.
seconded by Bill. Other questions, comments? All in favor of the approval of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. No old business, as stated before. New business, Noble Scholarship.
Noble Scholarship. We want to make sure that the board is aware and approve of the Noble family wishing to offer 2 awards of $1,000 each, and the friends and family of Lyle Noble are awarding 2 one-time scholarships for $1,000 to 2 graduating seniors. And the requirements are in the letter that is in the board packet. And I would recommend approval of that.
Look for a motion to approve the Noble Scholarship.
Make a motion to approve.
Rebecca, on the motion, seconded by
I'll second it.
Bill. Other discussion? All in favor of the approval of the Noble Scholarship, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consideration to complete an application to the Three Rivers Conference. We had that conversation. Does anyone have any questions, concerns that Reed or Bill can answer for us? If not, we would look to complete an application to the Three River Conference. We need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Bill,
I'll second.
second by Brenda. Other discussion? All in favor of the completion of the application to the Three Rivers Conference, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consideration to approve the final levy certification.
So as Josh presented earlier tonight, the truth in taxation, we will need to approve the final levy certification that will be sent into the state prior to December 31st. As you can see in the circled part here, this would be for a levy reduction of 1.66%. Back in the presentation was a resolution that would announce the 4.256 million that we will need to have in the resolution, and I believe it is written out that way for when we do the presentation, or for when you do the resolution, if you wish to approve that levy for tonight.
So the final levy certification is a resolution.
Yeah, whereas, and now therefore be it resolved.
We're missing our clerk.
Yes.
So we need a motion to approve before we read the resolution.
Yeah, so I'll make the motion to approve the levy as stated.
Bill on the motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Rebecca. When we're down a person or two, we make a lot more motions in seconds. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Where is that?
You can either read it off the TV if you wish. It is in your board packet in the last slide.
You want to be the clerk tonight?
That was really good last time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then,
I nominate myself to read. Okay, whereas pursuant to Minnesota State statutes, the School Board of Cannon Falls School District, Cannon Falls, Minnesota, is authorized to make the following proposed tax levies for general purposes. Maintenance, general funds, $2,209,000, oh wait.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, thank you, sorry. $681.25, includes referendum, community service, $142,038.89, debt service, 1.9 million, total proposed school tax levy, $4,256,176.25. Now therefore be it resolved by the School Board of Cannon Falls School District, Cannon Falls, Minnesota, that the levy to be levied in 2021 to be collected in 2022 is set at $4,256,176.25. The clerk of the Cannon Falls School Board is authorized to certify the proposed levy to the county auditor of Goodhue and Dakota Counties, Minnesota. Maybe I did want to read that.
thank you for doing that, Bill.
There's more numbers than I anticipated.
So we've got a motion, the second on the floor for the approval. Rebecca, would you like to read?
Oh, I forgot this part, sorry. Brenda,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Rebecca, yes.
Okay, that passes by a 4-0 vote. Round one of budget reductions. Been through this many times in my life. Maybe that's a good thing, that at least I have some experience doing it, but it hurts our community. And we understand that. And we have to make some value judgments based on a reduced enrollment, whether we like to or not. So this comes with a lot of effort by administration, a lot of explanation by administration, and now we're going to take a look at what the proposal is and have some discussion and decide whether this is what we'd like to do. But again, the loss of students, as Mark pulled out, means the loss of revenue. So we have to deal with that at some level. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff for discussion or for analysis.
As Bob said, because of the loss of students from the number of students graduating to the number of incoming students, and then the open enrollment plus minus, the total was 42 students, not all leaving due to open enrollment, but some of them are attributed to some of the issues that we have going on in the community with housing. But in the end, it's 42 students and about attributing to about $450,000. And so earlier this year, the board tasked administration to come back with $450,000 worth of cuts, and at one of our last meetings, we talked about that coming in two different segments. One that would be permanent reductions, meaning that they would not come back no matter how the February 8th election turned out, and then the second round would be determined after the election, but we would pass the cuts ahead of the election so that there was transparency in what we were doing and not make those decisions afterwards. As Bob mentioned also, there was a lot of time, energy, and effort put into creating these lists. There was not any short-sightedness. We understand that staffing and programs are important. No matter where you look at cuts coming from, you can make good arguments for all programming. We had, I would say, enriched discussions in administrative teams meetings over the past month or so. And these are the lists that we came out with as a recommendation to the school board. As somebody mentioned earlier tonight, it depends on a whole host of things about what these names are attributed to in the end, and eventually names will come back to the school board at the January 10th meeting, but as of right now, these are just general positions. The first cut on the list is a technology administrative support. As Tim had mentioned earlier, we did lose both of our admin tech support people, and we only replaced them with one, so this cut has pretty much already gone through, and we're already making accommodations for that, and that has at this point worked out pretty well from my viewpoint. Second item is district-wide grounds and maintenance, and this is a reduction in our watering that we do around the grounds, and also the fertilizing and some of the mowing. It's nice to have pristine grounds when you drive up, but it's not necessary when we're talking about being in the middle of $450,000 worth of cuts. The third item is a secondary English teacher, and that is a 0.5 reduction, so it is a half-time reduction. The next item are 3 high school, middle school overload assignments. And because of ESSER dollars that we currently have in the 6th grade, which allows us for an extra section of 6th grade to help with that transition from last year's pandemic year into this year and into a new building, that section will leave after this year, and we will move from 4 sections down to 3 sections, thereby eliminating the overload assignment. The next item is an RTI instructor in the elementary. Those are fully funded out of our general fund. We currently have 2 of those instructors. We also have 2 ADSYS instructors, which are grant funded as well, for that help do interventions.
And 1 title.
And 1 title, thank you. That is also federally funded as well. The next item on the list is a 10% district-wide supply budget. And so those dollars are coming out of maintenance, district-wide support, and also classroom instructional budgets. And finally, the middle school, high school music instructor. And what that looks like is currently we have 2 instructors, obviously, that are band and choir. There is musical lessons taught during the day. And at that point, those would be eliminated during the day and put into after-school or before-school programming through community ed. And the auditorium manager, is that the right terminology for that, Tim? Would also be a part of that cut as well. The number of bands would still remain the same. There would still be an opportunity for lessons before and after school, but they would be funded differently. You want to talk about just round 1 first? Or do you want to go into the...
No, let's talk about it.
What's that?
We can talk about round 1 before we vote on it.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Okay, before we even get into 2.
These cuts total obviously more than 300,000, but we do roll over the extra into round 2.
Brenda?
Oh, I was gonna ask about for the high school, middle school music instructor, then how would the bands be covered? Like, is there a 5th and 6th grade band? And who would be directing 7th and 8th grade band?
We don't have our schedules finally set yet, but we do have enough FTE, Tim, to cover those in our current FTEs. So we would not lose any bands.
How many students participate in the band program for high school, middle school?
At what level?
High school, middle school.
It's right at about, in music total is about 25%.
Okay.
Band is about half of that.
So
band might be a little more than half of that. So
12%. Split over both middle school and high school?
Yep.
So
There's roughly 50 kids in high school, and then each of the 3 middle school bands, there's between 25 and 30. And I don't know how many students are in the 5th grade band.
So Tim, are you able to clarify the 185 number that was being used earlier, where that's coming from?
185.
Number of students in band?
The number of students in band?
That's what Wyatt said
Yeah.
when he spoke.
That seems pretty high.
Yeah.
And we probably have more like 185 students in music, in band and choir total.
That's probably
For
the
middle school
combination.
and high school?
Yeah, it's closer to what we have in total.
Okay.
And what about the auditorium part of that? Would that be, how would that be covered?
The auditorium manager, we have groups, if they're outside of the school, they pay for somebody to come in, so they're funding that piece already. If it is during the school day, we would have an administrator cover it, I'm guessing for in-school programming for the auditorium.
That was added to Mr. Duggan's FTE to make him full-time. That was one of the last things that the previous superintendent did, was to add on to that, to make that position a full 1.0. So before that, we did not have anybody who was serving in that capacity.
But there was someone, because someone helps every time I run a concert. Someone is running the soundboard.
Right.
There was
They're-
always someone
they're
who was in
hired through-
charge.
They're hired through community ed.
Okay.
They're not a teacher and they're not a teacher on staff. They're
Okay.
hired through community ed.
Thank you.
We still have that person to do.
Okay.
How about the lessons conversation that we just heard? How do we factor the lessons in? They were run during the regular school day and at a cost to the district, and somehow if we run it outside of the parameters of the school day, it belongs to somebody else?
Well, if it goes to outside of the school day, it would be run through community ed. So that would be following your reads. during the school day, I believe this was 7 or 8 years ago, we started putting both band directors in each band. So one of them was listed as the director of the band. The other person was assigned there, and they pulled kids out of band to do lessons. So the majority of our lessons are done during band, so that doesn't impact other classes. Before that, both, I think it was Mr. Bryan at the time and Mr. Leipold pulled kids out of classes, the whole lessons on an individual basis. Obviously, there wouldn't be as much time if Mr. Leipold is teaching 5 bands here to do that, but that's still another option as well, is to pull kids during the day from other classes for band lessons.
Jim, pop that back up, would you? Oh, sorry.
And then would, if it was run through community, lessons or through community ed, would there be a cost to the parents then? That'd be like
I think the big thing is
an
that
activity fee or something like that, or?
Yeah, that's how we run our spring play, so we could do it that way.
Would there be scholarships available for, if families couldn't afford that? So it wouldn't inhibit kids from being in band?
That was my concern, Brenda.
Mine too.
I mean, it's not inexpensive to even rent or purchase an instrument and then to add it.
Do you have scholarships in community ed? Reed?
Yes.
Yep.
Normally not, but you have
Am I
to put
allowed to
input.
talk or not? This just doesn't appear very thought out. There's a lot of questions going back and forth as to how that would work. And it doesn't appear like a lot of thought's been put into that.
A lot of thought has been put into it, and in particular the admin. We look for our administration on a daily basis to run our school for us. And that's their job by statute, and our job by statute is to look at their recommendations, either yay or nay them, in accordance with what our jobs are supposed to be. So, yeah, we probably won't get into any discourse back and forth, but I appreciate hearing that. The RTI, that's always been something we can hang our hat on. And how are we impacted by that, by the loss of one RTI?
Well, as I mentioned before, the 2 RTI instructors are fully funded through the general fund currently. I believe they probably came about when the RTI program was first put into, or started coming out in elementary schools, probably at least over a decade ago. At the time, there was not any grant funding. There was a lot of schools. I was a school principal, including myself, wondering how we were going to run this program without hiring somebody to implement the interventions. And a lot of schools struggled with that, and some found the resources and some did not. Obviously, Cannon Falls did by hiring 2 RTI instructors. At some point along the line, Minnesota came out with grant money for ADSIS teachers to help that process along. And so at the time, they decided to keep the 2 RTI teachers plus the 2 ADSIS teachers. And obviously we have the title teachers. And let me know if I get ahead of my skis on some of this stuff. It should be. How does it affect it? There's roughly 30 to 40 kids, 35 to 40 kids for the 2 instructors each that rotate through doing different interventions. And a lot of schools, when this was being implemented, had classroom teachers doing interventions, which isn't unheard of in a lot of different school districts. And so some of the teachers are providing this instruction. Schools made the choice to keep class sizes high and hire interventionists. And some schools kept class sizes low and didn't hire interventionists. And so there's some choices that probably went along, that came along 10, 15 years ago when this program was implemented. And so if we have the interventionists, that's a choice, obviously, because classroom teachers could also do some of the interventions as well.
We would still have the 2 grant-funded ad system. We just have 1 RTI instructor that would be from the general fund then, if this cut was made. Plus the Title I teachers, how many Title I do we have?
We have 1
One Title I.
Yep. And that is almost fully funded.
And that
from
is for K-12,
Title.
we're talking, just,
K through 5.
just for
5.
elementary.
Yeah.
Yep.
May I ask a question? Was your question answered? How will this be impacted? Doesn't sound like the answer is that 30 to 40 students would not get that service.
Sure, we'd have to reprogram what that looks like in the elementary, Ms. Shipping.
And then, also I wanted to ask about the secondary English instructor. How would that affect courses offered, or is that's in the high school? Would it affect programming at all, or?
No. This year, we have one teacher who's got 1 period of her day covered through the ESSER dollar, the most latest round of ESSER dollar. And just because of increased requests for a specific English class, she's got an extra section of drama. So normally we run 1 section of drama, and we don't have this. We ended up basically having an ALP hour for students this year because of the ESSER dollars. So the 0.5 would be 2 class periods basically that would need to be covered, and we have those within the staffing we have. Plus, with the 7th grade going to 3 sections, I've got another class period available there to cover that whole piece as well.
The supply budget is always something that gets discussed every time that we have cuts. Somehow the supply budget does get picked on, if you will. I know that educators dip into their own pockets for their for some of their supplies, and although it seems patently unfair to them, it's kind of what's happening. But the supply budget, the 23 grand, does that encompass teacher supplies?
Yeah, some of that is, I don't know the exact number, that would be teacher supplies.
It would depend on the programming and the area level. At the elementary school, an instructor may have $200 for the year, so the 10% of that. Whereas science or maybe industrial art might be a little bit higher based on the amount of product they use for equipment. The biggest one is going to be maintenance. The majority of that, and then transportation. The majority of that is general fund, so of that, probably about 2/3 would be in maintenance and transportation. But it does definitely impact every teacher's budget, 10%.
So when it says district-wide, it's every budget or
General
every
fund.
department that has a budget.
Correct. Every department has a general fund budget.
You know, just an observation, it seems like if we've gone over our estimated amount that we want to cut or reduce, can we work that $18,000 back into the budget somewhere and still maintain that $300,000 cap? Jeff, I'm throwing that out to you.
Well, let's take a peek at round 2, because you'll see how we use that extra.
It comes into play in round
And see
2.
how it goes in, and maybe,
Well,
let me do the presentation of both of them.
I
And you
get
can
it.
see how that plays into,
yeah, could we,
The bigger
before we
picture.
vote, can we talk about round 2?
yep. Any other discussion or questions on round 1 at this point? We can come
Well,
back to it next.
I think I wanted to go back to the funding on the RTI. I think in some prior discussions that it's really around taking one position out, but it's not cutting the program per se. It's, and then somewhere are grant funded versus this one being general fund.
Yep.
And that's really what we're looking at doing.
But-
When we're
but-
looking at the overall cuts in general, we really wanted to make sure that we didn't cut a full program out.
Right.
And you'll kind of see that theme, I guess, as we go even into the second round.
Yeah, and the reason for that is the interventionists, whether it be title or access or RTI, have different, like, qualifications to be serviced by them. So, for example, a sped student cannot be serviced by access, but could be serviced by RTI. So I just want to make sure that that was clear.
So-
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the points I wanted to make is that in the end, yourself and Tim and Jeff have to think through a lot of this, and that's really why some of these questions come from us, is that we're not dealing with the nuts and bolts of this, and we don't have that understanding, but we're leaning on you on the recommendation. Thank you. You had a question?
Yeah, so, I mean, even with this though, we're still talking about 30 to 40 students who are dependent upon the staff position for interventions, correct? So
Those
what,
would need to be,
so,
It's reallocated.
so that would be reallocated to the teacher in the classroom to
Yep.
complete those interventions?
And let's be real, I mean, classroom teachers are making interventions all the time. I mean, there is not one line item up there that's not lose sleep over.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, we're tasked with making cuts. It's not easy. I mean, if it's not that, then what is it? That's my question. Yeah.
round two?
I believe. So we'll
Yeah.
delay any approval until
Yeah.
about round two. Sure. Hey,
So,
you're on.
round two was more predicated around the February 8th election. And we put it in different categories of both questions failing. Obviously, if both questions pass, we won't, we will reinstate what we have listed here. But if both questions fail, we will need to make some cuts. And then we had some different scenarios of one question passes and another one doesn't. So we'll kind of run through these fairly quickly. The first scenario involves both questions failing. The first cut is cutting elementary Phi-Ed down to the state minimum. Currently, we are all-day, everyday Phi-Ed, which is well above what the state requires Phi-Ed to do. And so that would be cut down from all-day, everyday to about every third day, I believe, or every fourth day. To the state minimum. That would require a 1.0 FTE elementary Phi-Ed cut. In reality, that ends up being, the cost of that is about 0.8 because we still need to have DAPE services provided to students, so we would either need to contract out 0.2 to either GCED or have that be an overload for another staff member that is DAPE qualified. Second item is to close the CCC and sell the building. The cost here is the operational cost of $25,000 a year. Obviously, the first question on the ballot deals with technology. The second deals with bonding issues, and part of that was fixing the roof at the CCC. If there's value from the community in holding on to the CCC, then we will need to have some dollars to fix the CCC. The third item here is if the first question fails, we will go to a bring your own device scenario, BYOD, as it's referred to. We would have families bring in devices for students to use in the classroom. There will still be costs for staff devices. And since we don't have any more computer labs, we would have labs on carts that would go around throughout both buildings as well. The next item is a tech-related cut that comes out of the high school, middle school administrative supply budget for software. And this is where the cut from round 1 comes into play because we use it in round 2 as a softener, if that makes sense. And then the leftover amount here for both questions failing is the 5,147 that we were over the other 150,000. The other scenario, or another scenario I should say, is if the tech fails, that's going to be question 1, and the building bond passes, we would still cut the FIAD position because currently we are funding technology out of our operating funds. We would go to bring your own device. We would have high school, middle school administrative supply piece again. We would have an additional 10% district-wide supply budget cut. And here is that number again from round 1 to reach 153,000. And in this scenario, we were 3,467 over. Finally, if the tech passes and the building part fails, we would move the LTFM dollars that were used or would have been used to repair those roof sections over a period of years up to these buildings. And so the 344,000 is actually LTFM dollars. These are the two numbers that equal the 25,000 from above, the utility costs and the annual maintenance costs, which is the cleaning of those buildings. And then the reduction from round 1. And this one is a little over because of the LTFM money that's being moved there.
The first one is permanent cuts.
Yep. So this would be permanent.
Discussed this real briefly before, but we're gonna make permanent cuts based on loss of students. Does it seem punitive at all to go into round 2 and say, if you don't pass that, we're gonna do this? Is that fair? People are gonna say.
Well, that's what the round 2 is, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, but I'm just asking, does it seem punitive that we are saying?
I think we've struggled with that idea of punitive versus transparent.
Exactly.
I mean, the reality is budgets have to be cut. And I think we erred on the side of we want to be transparent about this is what will happen. I don't know. That can feel a certain thing, and I could understand why it would feel punitive. But I think if we weren't transparent about that and came back with a second round of budget cuts, then I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer that everyone's going to be happy with.
I think if you didn't pass your round 2 cuts and you came out after the election and said, well, you didn't pass the building bond, so we're going to close the CCC, you will have people jumping at you saying, well, if I would have known that, I would have voted for it. Well, here's the information up front. You get to make the decision as a community member what you value.
I guess I don't think it's punitive as much as it is transparent.
And same thing with the bring your own device. Both of those tie to what we're asking the community. If the tech levy fails and we all of a sudden go to bring your own device, well, I would have voted for it if I would have known I had to bring my own device. It's the same argument, if you will. I guess I see it as being more upfront and transparent. People may not like to hear it, but there's a lot of things that people don't like to hear, but that's where we're at right now.
Well, and I think from a timing standpoint, before we discussed that actual question, and the idea of putting the information out there early in order for us to put it and discuss it, but yet also to have the community hear what we're looking at doing, to have the information in front of them, and hopefully we don't have that scenario you just mentioned. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the tech question, because without the bring your own, or the one-on-one device, we wouldn't have made it through the pandemic. And this really does concern me that we would be going backwards in that. I guess I said it once before that I was very disappointed that the tech levy didn't pass the first time, because it is instrumental in this community, that in this district, of what we do in instructing our students. So, the whole thing, we're still dealing with $450,000, either way we do it. And I still see it as being transparent, and allowing the community to hear what we have to see and what we have to deal with. And it's not easy. I'm sure the discussions as administration were lively. I've done this before. It's not fun. There's people involved. It's not just numbers. And I hear the music. It's come up before. We've figured out a way to make it work in the past. But the budget's gotten a lot smaller. $450,000 is a big number. The one question that I do have is, going into community ed, who do we have there? What are the available instructors? Is it a community member? I mean, is there a business in town that can do that, can pick it up?
I think that's
questions to
open.
be, yeah. And so the important thing, I think, from what I've seen on the paper, is that we're not losing a program unless I'm missing something here. think that's been the big thing that we've tried to deal with going in all the budget cuts before.
Well, and if lessons are competing, or before or after school, it'd be competing with sports. You're gonna lose a lot of kids that won't be able to do both.
It's true.
Mhm.
Before or after,
That time.
be after. But
But I think you can schedule those to suit the students' needs whenever they're, if they have practice at 5 o'clock, they can have a lesson after school, or I think that would be flexible depending on who the instructor is for that.
Well, another question with that, the band question, are we going out on an island of doing it this way alone as a district? Or are there other districts that operate in this fashion?
I know I've been in districts where we haven't offered lessons during the school day for a while, and that goes back to me being a principal and even a teacher. I mean, it's hit or miss depending on what districts can offer and what they can afford to offer.
My kids go to Hastings, and they have a state-renowned, amazing music program, and what makes it amazing is the private lessons that are offered during the school day. And they are literally working through this exact same question right now about whether or not to cut the lessons, and they reworked their numbers and made it so the lessons could continue because the community found so much value in that.
Can we talk just a little bit about tech again? We're asking for a tech levy because many schools have an independent tech levy and they don't pull their money out of the general fund as we seem to, right?
Currently, yeah.
At this point in time, we're struggling with that tech budget because it comes directly out of our general fund when other schools have levies like we're looking for directly.
Correct, it would be a source of revenue to cover the tech. Currently, it's just out of the general operating.
And I guess my point would be, it isn't unusual at all for a tech levy to happen with the school district.
No, it's not. That's the reason for the mechanism from the state to offer it.
Oh, and Jeff, could you clarify too? I mean, I know there are rumors out there, some groups that are putting out literature that 42 students have chosen to leave the district because of policies or board or the admin, but that number is coming more from attrition, I think, than from having larger classes graduating and smaller classes coming in.
Yep. What Brenda's referring to is a lot of you that live in the district got a pamphlet in the mail today that, again, had some bad information or information that's already been addressed. One of those statements was 42 students have left the district, and actually it was around 26 in the plus or minus of open enrollment. And again, we've talked about open enrollment in here before, that people come and go for whatever reason, and that's what you can do with Minnesota school districts. Over the past 10 years, it's not the highest number that we've had here as far as negative, and obviously it's not the lowest number. But that ebbs and flows throughout the years. However, another part of that 42 is students that have graduated and the incoming kindergartners, which kind of points to another problem which the city of Cannon Falls is dealing with right now, which is housing and having new families coming to the district. And I will say that that's probably the biggest threat that we have right now is finding ways to get more families into the district.
If we jump back into round one budget cuts, are you ready to make a motion on that?
I'll make the motion to approve round one.
Motion by Bill to approve round one budget reductions. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Brenda. Other discussion?
Do we have to vote on all of the cuts as a whole or
Like 1 and 2, you mean?
in the round?
So we'd start with round one, and then we would have a second. One as a whole, and then 2 would be as a whole as well.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of approval of round one budget reductions, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
I'll say nay too. I guess I would just like to know if we could look at some of these or look for other alternatives on a couple of these. Well, because the majority of this is still coming from personnel.
Okay, any suggestions?
Well, I think
First of all, that fails
it fails.
by a 2-2.
So, back to discussion. I think was noted in Josh's presentation that 68% of our budget is spent on staff and benefits. And so it makes sense that that's where the big numbers are going to come from. So there's not really a way to cut our supply budget for $300,000 and still be able to operate. So it's realistic that we have to stay within staffing. And staffing is driven by our funding by the state. It's the makeup that you probably have more of an issue with, I sense.
I agree with that, and if we do have an alternative, and the administration has spent this long to find us these, if you will, we need to step forward very soon to find alternatives. And if you're charging the admin with doing that again, they found us our best alternatives based on what administration brought forth. So I'm not sure where we would go with this next, and it would appear that we don't even have to approve round 2 until round 1 gets satisfied.
Well, let's go back to the timing, I think, I spoke of earlier in the transparency. If we delay this one more meeting, what does that look like for the community to have the information in front of them on what's really going to take place?
Our next meeting is January 10th.
Which is the
we have a break.
organizational meeting.
Organizational meeting, we'd be hard pressed at that meeting.
It could be done, but that would leave,
We would have to finalize on the January 24th, and that is about 2 weeks before election.
Yeah, I think we need to get information out. We don't really know what other alternatives might be because that wasn't presented, so.
so timing-wise, I guess, are you saying that if
We can go back and look at it administratively, sorry.
No.
But this has been hashed through in hours of the admin meetings,
Yeah.
and this
Well, I
fits
trust that.
our programming that we had to come up with. And you talk about the nuts and bolts of how schools work. These were presented and come up with on how we could make this work administratively without impacting programming as much as we could and looking at staff.
I mean, the reality is you can't cut this much without cutting staff, right? I mean,
Right.
there has to be, that's gonna be an element of whatever's proposed. And what is proposed.
And I appreciate and trust the recommendations.
So I was just gonna say, Brenda, are you considering waiting to
No,
the
I
10?
don't think we should wait.
Okay.
So
So
I guess I do just feel a little bit like not given
So-
options.
if that's the case, then I'd make the motion to,
I think we need to rescind what's happened.
and
So the last one failed by a 2-2 vote. Bill, are you calling for another vote?
yes. I think it's necessary to stay on the schedule of what we were intending to do for the community, and putting some trust in our administrators.
So first of all, Brenda, would you rescind your failed vote, your no vote? You need to go backwards
Well,
on this.
yeah, we just passed the motion to revote or to rescind.
You can make a motion again in a second and then just
That's what I
revote.
think.
Yeah.
So I make a motion again to vote on round one of 300,000.
Bill, in the motion to approve the round one budget reductions, correct?
Correct.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second? One more call, do I hear a second? I will make that motion. I will make that second. I'm okay to do that.
You can do that.
I read the book.
You can.
So we have a motion, a second on the floor. Further discussion. All in favor of round one budget reductions, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Can we do that? Yeah, there were a couple here, I think, that we just have some issues with. Or at least,
Did you oppose that? Or did you vote aye?
I didn't vote.
Nay, I said nay.
So we're still 2-2.
Well, Rebecca, what do you?
I'm, I'm struggling with some of the intervention services, given what we know about learning loss. I recognize that this is not, a complete cut to this program, and that there are other alternatives to that, and I think I'm just needing to, that's just the one that I'm really stuck on. So. And I think I know the question has been posed, then what's the alternative? And I don't have an answer for that. But
So if learning loss is one of your concerns,
I mean,
is it fair to say that we could use ESSER dollars to address learning loss over
Will
the
those
next,
be available, or
next
is that
calendar 2 budgets? We have through 23.
We have dollars to address learning loss. Those are being parceled out currently.
Right.
Right.
But we have,
But we have extra other ESSER dollars that, are you suggesting using some of the ESSER dollars that we have left for the following year, that there's no guarantee of getting more after that, that we would backfill and keep that RTI instructor for one more year?
I'm not suggesting keeping the
Okay.
role. I'm suggesting that we have the capability to address learning loss that you have concern with.
I mean, and I think that's part of my question is, I mean, I'm assuming that some of these interventions are a result of that learning loss, and that interventions are interventions are going to happen whether or not there's learning loss or not, you know, recognizing that we need to get this student up to par. Like I said, my concern is how has the pandemic and distance learning sort of inflated that, and like what's the long-term plan for that? Because I mean, for me, the struggle is we're talking about a core foundation of their academic experience that they're going to continue to build on. And if there are issues with that here, and we're talking 30 to 40 students, you know, and then we're going to go, okay, but it can happen in the classroom. I get that and I hear that, but I think we're also consistently asking our teachers to do more and more. And we're also talking about folks who are already, I think, we heard it, this is a December to remember. It's been 18 months to remember. I don't know.
Jennifer, can you shed some light on this? As far as what that would look like?
As far as,
So you said there's 35 to 40 kids per RTI teacher?
correct.
Okay, so what does that look like in reshuffling with the interventionists that we have?
I think a lot is determined on if ESSER funds are on the table or not. Like, I guess I'm seeing two different topics here talked about, so.
So currently, there's ESSER dollars that are available for learning loss, and then you have the option of using no ESSER dollars. So
ESSER dollars.
ESSER dollars is an easy one to answer, probably.
Do those continue into next year?
We can use them if we have them available, but
Okay. So yes, 35 to 40 students. And remember, interventions are sometimes, hopefully, fluid,
Right.
right? The intervention's done for a certain amount of time.
And then they're back in
Yep.
classroom.
And then you have students who are in there who've never left.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I shed any light for you.
Yeah, a little.
So I think part of the discussion that we had earlier, though, was the RTI positions being created versus classroom students. So if we're talking about keeping RTI, are we then considering increasing the number of students in our class set?
theoretically, I mean, like what you said earlier, if you don't take it from RTI, where are you going to take it from? And
Sure.
Increase class sizes somewhere.
Which is really one of the principles that we've tried to keep for the district, so.
Yes, it is one of the principles that we've tried to keep.
Okay.
Good point. Would you like to further discussion on this? Right now, we have a motion on the floor by Bill, seconded by Bob, to accept the round one budget reductions. Bill and I have both voted yes to this. And I'm going to ask one more time, all in favor of the motion to approve round one budget reductions, say aye.
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 I will vote yes, but only because I don't feel like I have other options presented. We need to make this decision and move forward.
It's a tough one. All those opposed?
Aye.
Round one budget reductions passes by a 3-1 vote. With acknowledgement to both of you that of your concerns, because we all have them. Round two budget reductions. You've seen them? They're up on the board. Gosh, that would be tough to see PE shrink. So good for our kids. I would look for a motion to approve round two budget reductions as shown.
I'll make the motion.
One second.
Motion by Bill, Seconded by Brenda. Other discussion?
Well, I think on this one, you know, the CCC, I hope pops out to the community, because we've been holding the budget on the CCC for years, and the programming that goes through it doesn't cover the cost of running that building. It's an important building in the community, and I think that's the important thing that I want to get across. It's in dire need of repair, and that's just my 2 cents, I guess.
Okay. Motion second on the floor.
And I would also just like to reiterate what Bill said, that I hope the community realizes that the tech part of it with the bring your own device, that we would not be able to get through a situation like the pandemic if we have to ever go back to distance learning in any situations, that it's really important that we have that technology. It would definitely be going backwards.
Anyone else? Motion is second on the floor. All in favor of round 2 budget reductions, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carry. We about done here. So, the reason I checked out a few times when it came to the agenda is I'm preoccupied this afternoon with a letter that you will be getting or have received already in the mail. It's a green sheet that talks about let your voices be heard. It's not green, but I made a copy. So there's 4 bullet points on here, and they're asking people to vote no to the upcoming referendum. And how do we get the school board to listen to us is the question. And I would say when you bring up an agenda item and a platform every week, we have listened. But from time to time, it gets a little overbearing when we have to rediscuss a number of things. I'm speaking for Bob here, by the way, just so everybody knows I'm speaking for Bob. The bullet point begins, a petition to have a community vote for a vacated board position was accepted yet dismissed. Was it dismissed? Number 1, and by the way, we followed that. When you look at the petition, and it's online at the school website, it has one statute sentence there. That's how they arrive when they talk to people in the community about signing up. Sign up. The statute is here and here. If I'm a teacher and I ask my kid to say the Emancipation Proclamation and he says the first sentence of it, I'm guessing he's flunking that test. So all you did was give a partial answer to a very big question. And I actually resent that this has been brought up so many times, like the statute that says we have to have a superintendent. 4 times that was asked. And maybe I couldn't categorize this the way I should, but this is a specific group that's charged with disruption, for lack of a better word. That, again, is Bob Britnell's interpretation based on what I'm reading at a state level and a national level. It's the call out there. Now, parents' rights to make health choices for their children have been overruled by the school board. I would say that's opinion more than anything else. Superintendent, you may want to chime in anytime. The school district has 43 fewer students. Why are students increasingly being homeschooled or enrolled in nearby districts? As he's pointed out, when you lose 17 kids through graduation, 100 leave, 83 are coming in. That's a significant portion of those numbers. We can't be held accountable by people's personal opinions on how we're dealing with COVID, what periodicals we we let the kids have to read for their education, all a positive thing in our book. So, once again, are the students being bullied is a question. Where'd that come from? Where'd that come from? There must be something dedicated that I'm not seeing or hearing among the administration that says our kids are being bullied. Patently wrong, like so many other of these things. They talk about our tax money. Jeff, I can't deal with that specifically. I wonder if you could. It's the last bullet point before we adjourn.
Oh, tax dollars for staff development. So I believe at our last meeting, we had our staff development report approved for $158,000, which deals with all of our staff training. They're making a reference to SEL, social emotional learning, to indoctrinate our students to critical race theory and gender fluidity. Critical race theory, at I think every board meeting since September or August, probably even July, we talked about the school district doesn't teach critical race theory. We teach to the standards. If they feel that the standards have critical race theory in it, they're barking up the wrong tree, they need to go to the state legislature and talk to them. And gender fluidity, I guess I'm guessing they're talking about the previous bullet point that it's accepting biological boys to use girls' bathrooms and showers. That's a federal law that we have to allow that. And so for people to assume otherwise, they're barking up the wrong tree. Again, they need to go to the federal government if they have concerns about that. We follow policies here, we have to. Not only because we have to, because it's the right thing to do. So, does that answer your question?
Sure it does. At the end, when you hand out something like this or send it through the mail, and by the way, I think if you spent more than $700 to $1,000, you should actually have to disclose that information about where the resources came from and plant that at the district office. Is that right, Lori?
Yes, correct.
So anything more than $750, $1,000, what is that number?
$750.
So any postage or anything like that, they have to disclose and within a certain period in time, give you that information. It just seems that when people don't attribute themselves on the bottom, then they're taking pot shots. And they've done it before, I don't know. A couple of these things have been handed out under people's windshield wipers with, again, no attribution. So what does that mean? What are we supposed to defend here? I will tell you one more time that we have an exceptional academic school here. And when we talked in the past, only last meeting, I brought up 3 or 4 points that indicated that we have it. None of that was on here. So apparently whoever puts this tripe out there agrees that we have a good academic school. So if that's the case, you're to be lauded for that, educators. I know you're here because it stings a little bit when you're looking at our budget, but without you, it just doesn't happen. And so I just want to make one more statement on that we do well. And for people who come up to me during the last week, and there's been at least a half a dozen, they're saying, what's wrong with the school? Absolutely nothing is wrong with the school. We operate as well as we possibly can. We give an above average extracurricular. Our kids can do just about anything they so desire. And their academic standards and their preparation for college is second to none in our area. You don't believe me? Just ask. U.S. News and World Report. Just ask. What we're trying to do next is to create that atmosphere at in our building by going through some other areas here with asking about a level, asking about CTE.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is we want to enhance that program in our shop, in our industrial arts area, to provide for the other kids that may not have a 4-year career in front of them, that may not wish that. And since we're doing so well in college preparatory and other areas in the district, we're asking for your help once more to assist our CTE students in getting the same type of education. Okay, I'm going to fall off the soapbox here soon, so I'm finished. I'm sorry. I just, it's grating on me when we get garbage. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Rebecca. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Merry Christmas, everyone.